Hola, buenas noches a todos. Bienvenidos a este último encuentro virtual del Family Bootcamp de Grupo Colmenares. Estamos muy contentos de poder compartir con ustedes estas sesiones tan interesantes que seguramente nos serán de gran utilidad en nuestra tarea educativa. Les quiero presentar a nuestra expositora de hoy, la doctora Meeker, quien es autora de 6 libros, entre ellos el bestseller Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters. Es pediatra estadounidense, conferenciante y tallerista de gran prestigio, con el objetivo de ayudar a los padres a construir hijos fuertes para un futuro mejor. Las preguntas se podrán realizar a lo largo de la sesión por medio del chat y al finalizar tendremos una ronda de preguntas y respuestas. También recibirán por el chat de YouTube y el de sus salones un link para que nos ayuden a registrar su asistencia y evaluar la sesión. Good night, Meeker. Thank you for being here with us. Now you may proceed.
Well, thank you, everyone, for inviting me and for attending this conference. You know, as a pediatrician, my goal is to help kids by helping their parents. And so when I have an opportunity to see parents that are really interested in helping their kids, I am so excited because there are a lot of parents that just aren't interested. But when I have a group of people that are really interested, I'm thrilled. What I'd like to talk to you about tonight is how to get your child, your son or your daughter, to age 25 and be a good, healthy, solid, happy person. And sometimes we forget about that. We parent in the day-to-day. And so I would like you to think about, what would you like your child, what kind of character qualities would you like your child to have when they're 25? What kind of a person do you want them to be? Because that's going to make a big difference in the decisions that you make with your child today. Because so many times we just get parenting and, you know, we put out fires here, we put out fires there, we make sure kids are doing things on time. But really what we want to do is be shaping character qualities in our kids through the years. And you can begin shaping those when they're 4, when they're 10, when they're 14. And when you think about that, that is a very countercultural way of parenting. Because when we read parenting books, we think of, oh, you know, how do you identify what your kids are good at? And how do you identify which school your child should go to? And, you know, how do you discipline your child? And those are all good things. But what we want to be doing is doing deeper work with our kids. We want to be getting them ready to be wonderful adults. Now, the good news is that takes about 25 years. And the reason I say 25 is that's because we know that by that time, a person's brain is perfectly developed and they can make adult decisions. So the good news is you get 25 years to do it. And the bad news is it takes 25 years to do it. And I say that because if you're struggling with a 10-year-old or a 15-year-old, an 18-year-old, hang on. You know, the story isn't written yet. Their story isn't written. What I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to talk to you about 3 things, and it's going to sound very, very simple. And it is simple, but it's hard. It's the hardest thing you're going to do in parenting. You know, when you think about parenting, as you think of 3 circles or child's life. Let's talk about child's life. There's 3 circles. There's an outer circle, a circle inside that, and then the very core of that, there's this very thick, solid ball, if you will. The outside circle represents all of the things that your kids can do to kind of, that are superficial, kind of get into trouble. You know, they can be with the wrong friends. They can spend too much time on television, on video games, on social media, so on and so forth. So those are the things that aren't necessarily good for our kids. In the circle and the inner circle, these are the things that our kids do that help them be better people. They go to school, they have good sports that they play, interests that they pursue, you know, good works that they do. And that's very important. And then at the very center of the circles is a very strong, I don't want to call it a ball, but it's the most important part of a child's life. And in the center are your child's relationships with you, mom and dad, your relationship with them, and their relationship with God. The reason I say this is because we parents tend to parent the outside circle first. You know, how much television you're watching, how much social media, what are you doing here? And we forget about the inner circle. But what we want to do, and this is what I'll talk about tonight, is not worry so much about the outer circle and the second one in, but focusing on the center of a child's life. And here's why. Because if we get that right and we make that center portion of the circle strong, you don't have to worry about the rest. You see, and what we're going to talk about tonight is how to make your relationship with your kids, your relationship with God, their relationship, the center of their life, and very, very strong. And as I said, it's very simple, but the simplest things are the hardest to do. So what are the 3 things that we need to do to make sure that our kids are strong in their relationships with us? And then as those get strong, then they start to develop strong character after that. That comes out of that. The 3 things primarily that kids need, all of us need actually, but I want to point them out on your kids because these are things we might forget about in our day-to-day life. The first one is attention. Say, well, I give my kids a lot of attention. Well, it isn't quite that simple because the attention they want from us is very different from the attention we often give. The second one is affection, and the third one is affirmation. So it's attention, affection, affirmation. So let's look at attention first. Now, why do our kids need so much attention? You know, we often hear parents say, oh, they're just acting up because they want attention. Right. So give them attention. Sometimes we use it as an excuse for our child's bad behavior. But in our time, we don't give our kids much attention because we're so distracted. We're distracted. They're distracted. Life is busy. We're trying to get our work done. We're trying to get dinner on the table. We're trying to drive our kids to places that we need to be. We're on our phones. We're on our iPads. We're on watching television. And our worlds are so busy and so frenetic, we don't pay attention to each other. We just don't. The only way to do that is to sort of begin to slow life down. So attention with our kids is very, very important. Every teenager towards the end of high school that I've taken care of who's gotten into trouble, you know, I don't know, gotten pregnant, run away from home, gotten into drugs or whatever, always tells me 2 things. And that is, no one cared enough to tell me no. No one paid attention to me ever. They didn't see me. They didn't know who I was. And, you know, those are very simple things, but it's the getting those right that keeps your child on a straight and narrow path. But when we forget to do them or we do them poorly, that's what gets our kids into trouble. Before I go on to talk about attention in more depth, I want to back up a little bit and say it's important as parents, if we're really going to help our kids, to understand what they're up against. And when we understand what their world is like, you're going to understand why our kids need the attention, affection, and affirmation more than ever. Our kids are living in a world which is, it's high tech. They have screens everywhere, short conversations, short attention spans that are getting shorter and shorter every year, it seems. Social media, girls spend a lot of time on social media, about 4 to 5 hours a day, which is an enormous amount of time. And the average parent spends between 30 and 40 minutes per day with their child. So think about that. We also know that social media in girls is directly, the amount of social media a girl uses is directly related to her risk of depression. And when you think about that, that's not hard to understand, because in social media, girls go there to get attention. They want their friends to like them. They want to see what their friends are doing and compare their lives to their friends' life. Who has the cuter boyfriend? Who has nicer clothes? Who's smarter? Who is doing this? So it's really a place where girls compare themselves with other kids. And that's really not healthy, because no matter who they are, there's always someone smarter, always someone with a better boyfriend, always someone who's better at school or whatever. And so girls really can't win on social media, but they go there for one reason. They want attention because they're trying to connect with other people. But you and I know as adults, the connection isn't real. They're not face to face. They're not touching one another. They're not hearing one another's voice. So it's a tension that really isn't super healthy. We've also got boys who are spending a lot of time, same amount of time, 5 or 6 hours a day on video games. And we think about that. A lot of boys who are watching video games and playing video games, a lot of the games aren't very healthy for them, very violent. And we have a lot of studies now that show the more time a boy spends playing a violent video game, the more likely he is to be aggressive and violent himself. He has less ability to be empathetic to somebody or sympathetic. In other words, it just kind of blunts their hearts, if you will. We also think about living in a culture that sexualizes our kids terribly. And that is that those who are selling things, shampoo, candy, movies, whatever, they have learned that if they lace products with sex, then kids will buy them. The average movie, even an R-rated movie, is targeting 14-year-old kids, 14 to 15-year-old kids. And they know that if they put enough sex in there and some words that parents don't want their kids to hear, the kids will want to go and watch the movie. The problem with our culture being sexualized is it objectifies girls and it objectifies boys. But particularly the harm that I see happening is that it prompts kids to be more sexually active. And kids are being taught now in schools and everywhere, you know what, it's fine. If you want to experiment, you have multiple partners, that's okay, because you want to figure out who you like and who you don't like. But from a medical perspective, this is very, very dangerous. And I wrote a whole book, actually, Your Kids at Risk, that details this. But kids are taught in school, you know, as long as you protect yourself and as long as you stay safe, then you'll be okay. But that really isn't true. We have so many infections out there. There's actually over 30. 1970, we had 2, and now we have over 30, well over 30. And the thing that bothers me with the infections is that kids make up about 30% of our culture, but they bear over 50% of the infections, sexually transmitted infections. So that means that when we sexualize our kids and they believe they need to engage in sexual activity and dress in skimpy clothes and so forth, it really leads to some very, very serious medical problems from an infection standpoint that nobody tells them about. And even if they're taught safe sex, that's a misnomer. Even in the medical community, we don't use that anymore. So there's that, which is very, very hard for young girls and for young boys. And then, of course, pornography that boys are exposed to. The average age of being exposed is between 10 and 11, and actually about 20% of all the regular pornography viewers are boys under age 11. And that's pretty startling. That's kids in the, in the 4th grade and under, and that's very, very young. So let's go back to our attention. Our kids need attention because they're looking for it. Girls are craving attention. They crave somebody to look at them and say, oh, you're wonderful. Oh, you're pretty. Oh, you're smart, or you're this. And if they don't get the right amount of attention at home or the right kind of attention at home, they will go out and look harder and harder for it. So how do we give our kids attention, and what kind of attention are they looking for? Well, first of all, I want you to think about your day. I want you to think about, what do you do in the morning? What do you do, at lunchtime, in the afternoon, dinner time, and after dinner in the evening? If you were really honest and you wrote down everything you do during the day for 5 days in a row, I think you'd be pretty startled at how little time you give your kids. It's not because you're a bad parent. Of course, we're busy. We're busy. How many of us walk into our house at the end of the day after work and our child is sitting there maybe doing homework or drawing a picture if it's a little child? We walk in the door and we're looking at our phone, we're answering a call, we're texting somebody, we're checking our email. We walk right by that child and right past them. What does that say to the child? It says to the child, you're invisible. You're not that important to me because I had to answer this text or stay on the phone. And it makes that child feel unloved. Now, you may not even notice that you're doing that. You probably aren't. You'll notice it if your kids are doing it to you because it'll make you angry. You look at your kid on the phone and you'll say, hey, get off that phone. I want to talk to you. Well, your child's saying the exact same thing. So it's very important when we give our kids attention that we focus on giving them time. We need to clear some time out during our schedule, being very deliberate about it, clearing some time to give our kids attention. And when we give them attention, we don't want to just talk to them so that we're going to teach them a lesson. We need to talk to them where we ask questions and we look at them and we listen to the answers. Parents, particularly mothers, me, are notorious for looking at your child, asking a question, not really paying attention to the answer, but waiting for the answer so that you can jump in and correct the answer. Because really what you want to do in this short amount of time is to teach your child what they need to do, what they need not to do. That's not the attention that our kids need. Our kids need the attention from us that says, I see who you are. I see you sitting there. I value you. And that's why I'm looking at you and sitting across from you. And I'm asking you questions and I'm going to listen to your answer. If kids feel that they only get a little snippet of attention from a parent here and a little bit here, maybe, 10 minutes at the end of the day or 10 minutes at the beginning of the day, they feel unseen. They feel invisible. And when a child feels invisible, they believe they don't have much value. Because again, we're talking about the most critical relationships in a child's life, which is the parent-child relationship. And if they feel that their parents feel they're invisible and they're not valuable, then they feel they don't have any worth. And when they feel they don't have that, then they go outside, jumping on social media, calling their friends, playing video games and trying to find a friend to play with them. They crave that attention. Now, the other reason that giving our kids attention is important is because it makes our kids feel loved, but it also makes our kids feel we like them. When they get attention from us, think about when you were a child. How did you feel when your parents paid attention to you? Or how did you feel when your parents didn't pay attention to you? If you grew up and you didn't have a father, you hurt deeply because you felt that you weren't worth your dad's time and attention. Or if you grew up with parents who were never around or weren't paying attention to you and just ignored you all the time, you probably feel like a very insecure parent right now because you never learned your sense of self and your self-worth, and you never really felt valuable or loved. And if you don't feel like that as a child, then you become a parent, and it's really hard to feel like you're confident in your parenting and that you have value as a parent because you never learned that as a child. It's a very simple thing, but it's giving your child appropriate, healthy attention is extremely important. Now, when you give your child attention, there are some things you want to do and things you don't want to do. You want to pay attention to character, not necessarily how they look or what they're doing or how well they're doing. For instance, if kids are doing well in school, or they're doing well in sports, or they have the right friends, or they're pretty, or they're doing a lot of the good things, we pay more attention to them because we want to praise them. We say, oh, you look so pretty today, or gee whiz, you scored a goal. That is so great. Or I'm so proud of you. You got these great grades. That's all fine. But if that's the most kind of attention that we give them, it's not fine. It's not healthy. Kids want attention, not because of what they do, but because of who they are. And they want to know that their parent sees them as a lovable, valuable person, no matter what they do. Here's a case in point. Very commonly, parents who are educated, bright, intentional parents who really love their kids work hard to get their kids involved in the right sports, the right opportunities. They want to make sure that if they're struggling with math, they have a math tutor for them. And very often the kids who excel at something. I had a gal who was on her way to the Olympics as an Olympic skier. And so her parents put a lot of time and energy and money into developing her skiing. And they flew her all over the world, and they bought her the best equipment. And they really spent a lot of time doing this for her. And on the outside, you'd say, that's great. They gave her so much time and attention. Hold on. It was the wrong kind of attention. When she came in to me when she was 15 years old, she was very distraught. And I asked why she was so distraught. And she said, I hate skiing. I'm not going to ski. I can't stand it. I'm done. And she said, but my parents are very upset with me because they want me to keep going to the Olympics because that will, make them feel very good. She said, the problem is, I feel if I don't keep skiing, are my parents going to pay attention to me? Their whole relationship revolved around her activity. And while they thought they were giving her a lot of attention, which they were really giving attention to her performance. And the better she did, the more attention they gave her. And we fall into this trap of parents who have successful kids. And again, this gets a little tricky. And that's why I say giving attention and affection and affirmation sound very simple, but they're very, very hard. The attention she got was very unhealthy for her because it defined her relationship with her parents. And she was so afraid that if she gave up her skiing, what would she talk to her parents about? Would they be happy with her? She didn't know. She had no idea. Do my parents like me because I'm just me? And or do they just give me a lot of attention because I do really well? Because if I do really well, then they feel like really good parents. And so you know what I'm saying. This is really hard. So I'm not saying that we shouldn't pay attention to our kids and their sports and everything. Of course we should. But we need to go deeper than that. We need to show attention to our kids just because they're there. Just because they're there. For instance, that's the kind of attention your kids really want. Let's say you are doing errands on the weekend, and let's say you're a dad and you have to go change the oil in the car, and everybody's just sort of milling around the house, and you look at your daughter and you say, hey, I haven't really talked to you all week. Will you just come change the oil in the car with me? And she jumps in the car and she drives and she does this chore with you for about half an hour. She gets out of the car. How does she feel about herself? She feels like $1 million. Why? Because you gave her attention just because you wanted to be with her. You didn't want her to do well at something. You didn't want her to excel or prove something. You didn't want her to be a certain way. You just wanted to be with her. And that's the kind of attention when we communicate to our kids. We just want to be with them because we like who they are and they're valuable to us because they're our son or our daughter. That's the kind of attention that begins to grow the healthy part of our relationship with them. I had, and this is critically important for fathers to give to daughters. So I'm going to put you moms aside for a second. I'm going to talk to just the dads here, because your daughter, whether she's 5 or 15 or 18, needs your attention. And if she doesn't get your attention when she's a teenager, she will find male attention. She will. And she'll find the wrong kind of male attention. Daughters need their father's attention, because when their fathers pay attention to them, it makes them feel very, very important. Let's say, for instance, that your daughter was having a lot of struggles. I've seen this happen before. If a daughter is having a lot of struggles with school, and dad is very busy at work, and she comes home and she asks mom for help, and mom says, well, you can do this and you can do this. And she goes, yeah, I know I can, mom, but she expects for her mother to say to her, oh, you can do this. And so she kind of passes it off. This isn't a slight on mothers. It's just often how kids see their mothers. But when a father says, I see you're having in trouble math, let me help you. I know you can get these problems right. In that girl's mind, she will get them right because her father says so. So what a father shows a daughter attention, she believes she's worth something. Because in a weird way, kids feel like their mothers have to pay attention, but they feel like their dads don't have to pay attention. So when their dads ask to do something with you, or to sit down and talk with you for 20 minutes, or ask you to go out to breakfast with them, girls feel so strong and so wonderful and so capable because they admire their fathers. Fathers are enormous in a daughter's eyes. Fathers are their hero. Fathers are the smartest men. Fathers are the ones who show them how men should treat them. And I'll tell you a secret, dads, when your daughter goes on a date or first starts learning about boys, every boy she meets, particularly every boy she has a crush on or wants to date, she compares to you. So if you have respected your daughter and you don't yell at her and you treat her well, the first time she was with a boyfriend who doesn't speak well to her and doesn't treat her nicely, guess where he goes? Out the door. Because you have shown her a different way. You have given her the attention to show her how a man should treat her. But you also have the ability to keep your daughter on a very healthy path in life. I once had a girl who was 15 or 16, I can't remember, it doesn't matter. And she was getting a lot of trouble of high school. She was dating a guy who was a lot older than she was. She got into drugs and her grades started to drop and she was really headed down a bad path. And her father worked all the time. She didn't really see her father very much, but she was quite close to her mother, and her mother was pulling her hair out. She didn't know what to do. She tried to help her and coach her and so forth, but she couldn't figure out what to do. So they came in to see me, both mom and dad, and they wanted to send her away to a school for 6 weeks that would help her and get her back on track because she really was seriously depressed and so forth. And I said, well, there are plenty of places I could send you, but I'd like you to try and experiment first. And I looked at the dad and I said, I would like you, dad, to take your daughter away for 4 or 5 days, just the two of you, and maybe go camping or go boating or go hiking, whatever you want to do, but just the two of you get away on your own. And the father was very startled and he was frightened because he didn't know his daughter that well. And that was part of the problem. He was so busy with his work that he really didn't have much time or attention for his daughter. So I never heard from them again. 3 weeks later, I ran into her father. 3 months later, I ran into her father at a store and I say, how are you doing? I never heard back from you. He said, well, we followed your advice and I took my daughter camping. And he said, the first day of our trip together was terrible because she wouldn't talk to me. And then the second day, she started to talk to me, but she yelled. And then the third day, she started crying But by the time we were ready to go home, we were talking to one another. And he said, Dr. Meeker, I realized I never really talked to her. When they came home, she didn't need to go to the boarding school that was going to help her with her problems. So she and her father decided from then on that they were going to make a point of every Saturday morning having breakfast alone together. That was it. An hour a week from her father. Let her know, communicated to her, you are valuable. I cherish you. You're my daughter. I will show you how to live well, and I will show you how important you are. And so that's the power of a father at work in a daughter's life. And it's about giving her healthy attention, not just sitting on the sidelines, cheering her on in a soccer game, or taking her all around to ski tournaments, or making sure you get her into enough recitals, or making sure she has a car when she's old enough, or providing a big enough home. Those aren't things she wants. Sure, they're nice. What she wants is you to look at her and say, I really want to hear what you have been up to this week, because I love to hear you talk. I just love to be with you. That's the kind of attention your daughter needs. Mothers need to give their girls a different kind of attention. And mothers need to be available for our daughters so that we can listen to things that they will say to us that they might not say to their fathers. They might be less embarrassed in front of mothers because we're women and we understand them differently, so they can talk sort of in a different language. And it isn't that they don't respect us. They do respect us, of course, but we talk to them more frequently. We talk to them about more things than daughters would talk to their fathers about. So it's very important that we're available whenever our daughters need to talk to us, because if we ignore them and we're never available and we don't spend enough time with them as well, it doesn't need to be big chunks of time. Maybe it needs to be just 15 minutes when they're sitting in the kitchen doing your homework and we're getting dinner ready, we're listening what they have to say. So finding time to give our kids attention doesn't have to be huge chunks of time. It's a half hour here or 20 minutes here. But and also it's important, like this girl with her father, to set aside some very deliberate time to be together. And the other thing that I want to encourage mothers is that if you have a husband or even an ex-husband who is willing to give time and attention to your daughter, help him, support him. Don't work against him. Don't be jealous of his time with her. Encourage them to get away on their own. A lot of times mothers want to pull their daughters towards them, and they kind of want to push the dad out of the way and say, no, I understand, or you don't. Don't do that. Don't get in your husband's way of a good relationship with your daughter, because you play a critical role in helping your daughter have a great relationship with your husband or her father, because she needs that relationship. She needs that time with him. So that's about attention. And that's why it's critically important to give the right kind of attention, to give enough attention, and to give your daughters attention, not because they're doing something well, but because they're your daughter and because you love them for who they are. Then we move on to affection. Now, many of us say, well, I'm affectionate with my daughter, or my son. I hug them periodically, and that's important. Well, back up a little bit. Many people have a hard time being affectionate because they weren't shown affectionate. So if you grew up in a home where people didn't show one another much affection, or you weren't shown affection as a child, you may have a hard time being affectionate with your kids, and that's perfectly normal. But your kids need affection. They need touch. And again, it's a physical and psychological need, because physical touch and affection helps you connect with your kids on a deeper level. Again, If you don't show affection to your children, they will find affection because they need to touch and they need to be hugged because it makes them feel loved and seen again. And this is one of the things that particularly during the teen years, we can ignore because it's hard to give affection often to a teenager. It's really easy to give affection to a 5-year-old or an 8-year-old because they're cuddly and they're fun and they don't give you a really hard time. Now, if you do have a young child who acts up a lot, it's very hard to give them affection, but you need to do it anyway, because a lot of times they act up because they want your attention and they want your affection. It's very, very, very important. But affection has to change the type of affection must change according to your child's age. For instance, typically when a son or daughter is young, they can sit on your lap, they'll give you hugs, you can kiss them, and that's all very important. But when they hit the teen years, and this is particularly hurtful for fathers, their daughters may come to them and say, don't touch me, I don't want anything to do with you. And the fathers, unfortunately, take it very personally and they say, okay, you don't want me to touch you, I'll go away. Don't do that. When your daughter rebuffs your affection, then you need to realize it has nothing to do with you. She's uncomfortable with her body. She doesn't want touch because she is afraid she's going to be ugly. And the same is true with boys, particularly with their mothers. Sometimes when you're 15, 16, 17-year-old boy, you don't want your mother to hug you because it can feel kind of weird. You don't know if you're a man or if you're a boy. It can get kind of complicated. So as your child moves into the teen years, shift the way you show affection. If your daughter doesn't want big hugs, particularly in front of her friends, don't give her a hug in front of her friends. Touch her on the shoulder, touch her on the head. When you see her, kiss her on the cheek. Showing affection is very good at night when the kids go to bed. Go in and give them a kiss goodnight or touch them on the hand and just say, I love you. How was your day? Have a good night. So find different ways to show affection to your kids, and it's got to change as you get older. But one thing I would encourage you to do, look at the way you feel comfortable giving affection. How do you show affection? If you're not really sure, ask your spouse, they'll tell you. And then ask yourself, how does my child want affection? What makes them feel most loved? How do I show them affection that makes them feel very loved? And you do a little detective work, then you can be very successful at showing your kids enough attention. And then finally, kids need affirmation. Now, what does affirmation mean? Affirmation means, again, that you're not going to just clap for them if they're really good at something. Affirmation means that you support them and love them, encourage them because they have character qualities that are strong and that you want to help develop. Many parents say, well, I affirm my child often because they're smart, again, their grades or whatever, or they're a good person. And that's okay. You want to applaud those things. But more important, you need to find some character qualities your child has, and you need to nurture those character qualities. For instance, if your child perseveres, is very tenacious, you may look at your child and see he's doing his homework and is very frustrated and can't get it right, but he continues to go on and on and on and finally finishes it. You go to him and say, wow, I'm so proud of the way you persevere. If your child is particularly courageous, you give them affirmation of a time you saw them be courageous. If your 5-year-old is very patient with her 3-year-old because she let her play with her toys, or her 3-year-old sister was pulling at her hair, giving a hard time, and your 5-year-old didn't yell at her, you go over and say, I am so proud of you that you're so patient. So these are the kinds of things that you want to affirm in your kids. Again, you want to find 3 or 4 or 5 character qualities that you want your child to have when they're older, and begin developing and affirming those character qualities when they're young. In our family, it was very important from the time our kids were young to affirm them in the way they spoke. They weren't allowed to be mean to each other. They weren't allowed to swear. They weren't allowed to say nasty things in our home. It was also important to us that they had a strong faith in God. So we wanted to grow that and affirm that. And finally, one thing that was very important to us was the character quality of humility. And so we tried during the years, we had other character qualities that we wanted to develop in our kids as well, but those were some of the most important. And so in order to achieve that, in order to show them a faith in God, it's very important to model it yourself. And it's also important to do things alongside your child that will help them develop humility. For instance, every once a month, all the years our kids were growing up, we worked in a soup kitchen, and our whole family went, and we served the poor in our community. And we did this year after year after year after year, because we wanted our kids to understand that no matter who they thought they were as valuable as anybody else, no better, no worse. Even if they got the best grades, their value was the same as those in their class who were failing. And even though they had a nice home, their value was the same as those who had no home. And that's how you teach your kids humility, which is very, very important. And a lot of times you teach your kids through humility through service. That's a very good way to connect with your child, to grow your child's character qualities, to teach them to be less selfish and more selfless. And again, it's a serving alongside your kids at any kind of project. You know, you might find a neighbor who needs help, and consistently every month you and your child go do something for that neighbor, or you help somebody who's building a house, you work on a project together. You go into a nursing home, you and your child, and you talk to, one of the residents once a week. Those are the kinds of things where you can accomplish a lot all at once. You're giving your child attention, and you're with your child, and you're affirming their ability to live with humility. So that's a very easy thing to do. So if you just get a little bit creative, you can develop a lot of things in your kids and communicate some things to them at the same time. Like, you are strong enough to work alongside of me. You can have the strong character qualities I have, and I'm with you, and I'm showing you hopefully affection along the way too. And I'm affirming you and giving you my attention at the same time. These are very, very important to develop. I just wanted to sort of show you how one of the things that my husband did as our kids were growing up. He was a terrific role model, and I wrote a book, Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters, because we have 3 daughters, and I think he did a remarkable job with our daughters and our son is the baby. But as I watched him work with our daughters and be with our daughters over the years, I felt sometimes a little bit jealous, because they adored their dad. They adored me too, but again, it was different. When their dad gave them attention, it just meant something different than when I gave them attention. But anyway, so they really looked up to their dad, and every year my husband would take the girls on medical mission trips to another country. And they would reach people in the outlying areas who had no water, no food, no light, no medical supplies or healthcare. And they would go to these places, and they loved it because they were with their dad. But again, it affirmed them as women and made them feel strong. Well, when they came home from the trip, my daughter was going to go with my husband to pick up some Chinese food, because it was late at night. everybody was busy. I had nothing to cook for dinner. It was 7 o'clock and people are hungry. And I said, would you go get some Chinese food for dinner? And so my husband left to pick it up and my 8-year-old daughter went with her. And before he left, I said, please don't forget the egg rolls. That's the only part of the dinner that I like. So he went, he came home, and I noticed I was opening all the food. There were no egg rolls there. And I got very, very upset because I didn't like anything else. And my daughter came over to me as I was, kind of chewing out my husband a little bit. And she said, Mom, don't get upset with Dad. And I said, why? And he said, because on our way home, Dad saw a man at Bryant Park rummaging through a trash can, and he jumped out of the truck and he brought him the bag of food and said, what would you like? Take whatever you'd like. And the man took my egg rolls. And so that was a lesson she never, ever forgot, because alongside of my husband, she saw what humility was. He affirmed in her that she could live with humility. And to this day, she works as a teacher in a school with a lot of needy kids and absolutely loves it because her dad taught her about humility. We only have a couple minutes left here, and I want to take your questions. Attention. When you get home tonight, I want you to write down for the next 3 days or the last 3 days, what did you specifically do during that day and how much attention did you really give your kids? I want you to think about affection. What kind of affection does your child want and how often do you give it? And be truthful. If your child is hard to live with, are you still giving that child affection? It's hard, but you still need to. Even if your child rebuffs you and pushes you away, you wait, you come back a couple days later and you try again. You wait, you try again, because your child, even if they're acting up, even if they're flunking out of school, even if they're hard to live with, they need your attention and they need your affection. And finally, affirmation. Ask yourself, what am I really praising my child for? What am I affirming? Am I affirming character qualities, or am I just affirming the things that my child does well? And then shift gears a little bit. Find 3 character qualities that you want your child to develop over the years that are strong when they're in 25, that you want to start nurturing right now. And as your child gets older, you help grow those character qualities and you affirm those character qualities when you see them in your child. Attention, affection, affirmation. 3 very simple things, 3 very hard things to do, but everyone listening to my voice can do it. I know you can do it. You just have to be intentional. You have to make time for it. And once you get in the habit of doing it, it gets easier and easier. So thank you so much for listening. I'd love to open up for questions right now. I think we have time for questions, don't we?
Yes, we have time.
Great.
So first of all, thank you very much, Meg, for the session you just shared with us. So let's start with the question and answer round. Vamos a comenzar con la ronda de preguntas y respuestas. Si alguien tiene alguna, puede escribirla por medio del chat. Okay, the first one is, what can we do when we find it difficult to connect with our children because of the different personality?
Mm-hmm. Well, that is hard. That's very hard. What I would try to do is try to find one thing that you have in common. And you can usually find one thing that you have in common. Is there something your child likes that you like? Is there something, some common ground where you can come together with your child and do those things together? Let's say your child is very short-tempered and gets angry a lot, and you're very quiet and easygoing, and you clash all the time. But maybe you both like watch a television show, or you both like to play a certain game. Come together on those things and just spend time with each other. And If you have a personality clash, and that'll begin to draw you closer together, the more you spend more time together on something that you enjoy together. When your child clashes with you and they're upset with you, don't take it personally. Try to stand back and say, wait a minute, my child is upset and my child is volatile and my child's angry, not because of me, because that's who they are. So don't respond back to them. In other words, if your child, for instance, doesn't have a lot of motivation and they're very quiet and they're kind of introverted and you're very outgoing and you're very gregarious, you may try to pull your child out and there's tension there, but don't do that. Let him be who he's going to be and accept them. But the more you can accept the child for who he is, he'll begin to accept who you are and come together on common ground. And when there's friction, don't move into that friction. Don't respond. Just pull back and let it pass. And that's the best way to deal with conflicts with different personalities.
Thank you very much, Meg. The next question is, as fathers and mothers of boys, what kind of attention and affection do you need from each of them?
From the mother and the husband, or to each child?
To each child, the father and the mothers to her boy.
Yeah. Well, ideally, it's the same amount. Typically, mothers give their kids more affection because we're usually with them more. Not all mothers, some fathers are stay-at-home dads and they're with the kids more. And so I think it doesn't matter how much affection and attention, as long as you do some every day and you're very deliberate in it. As far as affection, the more you can give your kids, the better, particularly dads with girls and particularly dads with boys. And a lot of fathers are uncomfortable giving affection to their sons, but you got to get past that because boys need it as well. Mothers, of course, as much affection as you can give, but again, you don't need to do it constantly, but a little bit every day from each person is very, very important. The most important thing is for one person to show all the affection and attention and the other person not. That's when kids get into trouble, is when one parent withholds affection and attention, even though the other person gives a lot. It doesn't always balance out. You need it from both parents.
Thank you very much. The next question is, can you give an advice for all the working moms?
Sure. Life is hard. No, but I think the most important thing to do is to set your priorities. And where a lot of working mothers get into trouble is they expect way too much of themselves, way too much. You can't be everything to everybody. So you do a good job at your work. And then when you come home, this takes training, mental training. You have to leave your work behind. I learned that when I was on my way home from work, back home, a switch went off and I intentionally left work behind and started focusing on what's happening with the kids. Now, when I came in, my focus was dinner and spending time with the kids. It wasn't laundry and it wasn't cleaning. And sometimes you have to let some things go and you have to figure out what do you need to let go. If your priorities are spending time with your kids and doing a good job at work, then maybe you need to give up some cleaning, or maybe you need to have your spouse help you more, or maybe you need to give up some exercise, or maybe you need to give up a hobby. But remember, it's only temporary, because kids grow up and they're going to move away and you're going to have a lot more time to work and bring in some of those other activities in your lives. But I think where you really burn out is expecting yourself to be a perfect mother and to work well at home and have a perfect home and perfect meals. Nobody can. Nobody can. So do two things well. You do your work well and you spend time and attention with your kids and affection. And anything else that you do on top of that, you've got to have somebody help you and have your kids help. If your kids can cook, they've got to cook. If your kids can clean, they've got to clean. They've got to pitch in and do a lot of chores around the house. Work is good for kids.
Thank you. And the last question is, what do you think of the advice that many people give about giving quality time, not quantity time?
They need both, but sometimes quality time is having an argument with your child. And we always think of quality time as being with our kids when we're doing something fun and we're enjoying ourselves and we're laughing and we're this, but you can't, but that isn't really quality time. You need enough time to have quality time. And sometimes it's, if you're not available for your child when they really need something, for instance, your child may come home. Our kids, when they were seniors in high school, had periods during the day where they could come home. And if they'd come home, and if I was home, even just for an hour, we would have great conversations. And sometimes an argument would arise, but we'd figure out how to resolve the argument. So you really need enough time. Kids want your time. They want your time and attention. They're not concerned about quality time because they don't think they need to be entertained. They just want your time and they want you to pay attention, time and paying attention. So don't worry about quality time. Just the more you can be with them in the same room with them and hear what they're saying, the better.
Thank you very much, Meg, for the session you just shared with us. I don't know if you have a last comment, Centers, or invitation to close our session.
Sure. I just want to encourage every parent, whether you're a single dad or a single mom or, married, divorced, it doesn't matter. You can be a great parent and you can raise great kids. And I also want to encourage you. I just created something called the Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters Masterclass. And you can go to my website, meekerparenting.com, and find it. It's in Spanish. And it's 10 videos of me talking through different things that you can do with your daughters to really strengthen that relationship. And I would encourage mothers to listen to it too, because we have a lot of influence over the relationship our kids have with their dads. And our kids need their dads. And we need to help them. So it's Strong Fathers, Strong Daughters Masterclass. Just go to meekerparenting.com.
Thank you very much, Meg. It was an honor to have you with us at this family bootcamp.
Great. Thank you so much. God bless.
Thank you very much, Meg.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye-bye.
Sin duda fue una sesión extraordinaria que nos dejará grandes aprendizajes. Como Meg acaba de comentar, los queremos invitar a participar en el nuevo curso de Strong Father, Strong Daughters Masterclass, impartido por Meg Meeker, que contiene unas clases magistrales sobre este tema, padres fuertes, hijos fuertes, y consta de 10 módulos. Les dejamos la liga en el chat y descripción del video para que puedan inscribirse y aprovechar esta oportunidad. Muchas gracias a todos. En este momento damos por terminada la sesión, no sin antes recordarles que a partir de mañana recibirán el takeaway de esta sesión. Los takeaway es un recurso electrónico que utilizamos para poder mandar la información esencial, puntual y resumida de esta sesión que acabamos de presenciar para que pueda ser utilizada posteriormente. Buenas noches a todos y gracias por acompañarnos en este preview del Family Bootcamp.